She gave her a resounding slap, and everyone froze. Camille thought the worst was over, until another woman came into the picture. Will Taeyang and Camille's relationship survive? What is coming next? Or will Simone get her way? Welcome back, besties. If you thought Siwoo and Simone were finished after part 1, they are far from finished. This time, the stakes are higher, the money is bigger, and the fall is going to cost more than anyone in that family is prepared to pay. Before we go there, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. We drop stories like this every single week, and you don't want to miss what's coming. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love reading them. Now, let's go back. Back before Camille was even born, to the marriage that made all of this possible. Siwoo and Dominique were 2 years into their marriage when Seoul still called him a rising man. His transportation business was climbing the way ambition climbs when a man has the right connections and none of the humility to match them. And it was around then that he brought on a young bodyguard named Chan-woo, quiet, broad-shouldered, the kind of man people forgot was in the room until they needed him. The marriage had already begun rotting underneath its polish, 2 years in, and Dominique still didn't understand what had pulled her into it. Siwoo had gone from calling her a gold digger to something with no warmth left in it at all. Infertile, he called her, as if her body had failed a test she never agreed to sit. 2 years of trying with nothing to show for it, and he wore the disappointment like it belonged only to her. Dominique had never once felt Siwoo's mother's love, not a single day of it, and she had spent those years quietly deciding the woman was the one poisoning her son from a distance. That, and the silence in her own womb, were the 2 things she blamed for the man Siwoo had turned into. "You're back late, Siwoo," she said one night, sitting on the parlor couch, waiting the way wives wait when they already know the answer and ask anyway. Because asking is sometimes the only thing left that still feels like dignity. "You have no business questioning my activities," he said, handing his bag off to Chan-woo without so much as a glance at her, already moving toward the stairs. Chan-woo watched her from where he stood. He always watched her. There was something in the stillness she wore, years of practice folded into a single posture, that made him ache for her, even as he trailed Siwoo everywhere, even as he clocked, night after night, the specific cruelty of a man who had decided his wife no longer deserved his attention. She looked like she needed a shoulder to cry on, you know. That was all it was, at first, Chan-woo said, sitting across from a grown Camille who took the words in without moving. She had spent her whole childhood believing her parents' marriage was the one clean thing in that house. Watching it come apart now, in Chan-woo's voice, felt like watching a photograph she loved slowly develop into a stranger's face. She had spent 2 years making a kind of peace with something ugly, that no matter how much of a coward her father was, he was still the only one who had actually stayed in the room. She had wrestled with the idea of coming to see Chan-woo for weeks before Taeyang finally pushed her toward it, not because he needed answers for himself, but because he'd watched her carry unfinished questions around like stones in her pockets, and he knew what that kind of weight did to a person over time. So, on a Tuesday morning, without telling anyone where she was going, she went. And that was how Chan-woo started to tell his daughter of the past, from before she was even born. How consoling Dominique had folded, slowly, into something else. How a man who told himself for months this was only comfort had started imagining, without meaning to, a whole life with his boss's wife. Then 3 months after their affair, Dominique came with the most shocking news. "Chan-woo, I'm pregnant. The family doctor just told me after my routine checkup," Dominique said, her face caught somewhere between fear and something that hadn't finished deciding what it wanted to feel yet. "I want to be with you, Dominique. I want to raise this child with you. I love you." It was the first time he had ever said it out loud, and it arrived exactly when she needed something to hold on to. "I want to be with you too," she said, and she meant it the way she meant everything. Dominique had always loved that way, completely, without a safety net. It was why she had walked away from a fashion career in the United States and followed a man across an ocean to Seoul, a decision she would spend years quietly grieving. She told herself she'd go back to designing once she'd ended things with Siwoo. Camille listened to Chan-woo sat with that piece of her mother longer than the rest. Her talent hadn't fallen out of nowhere. Her mother had carried the same gift and buried it under a marriage that never once asked what she wanted. But what waited for Dominique when Siwoo came home that evening wasn't the ending she'd been planning toward. He walked in with a gift in his hands and a smile she hadn't seen since the earliest months of their marriage. Open, unguarded, in love, in a way she had almost forgotten his face was capable of holding. "The doctor said you're pregnant, baby," he said, folding her into a hug so warm it stunned her, and then a kiss deeper than anything he'd given her in years. What name will we name her? He asked, and Dominique just stared at him, something in her chest going very quiet. That was the moment everything turned. She let him believe it was his. She was surprised. He believed it was his. Maybe it was the loveless nights they'd still shared from time to time, when he came home drunk and reaching for her out of habit as much as need. Maybe the love was born in Siwoo's heart again, the moment he found out that Dominique was pregnant. Maybe the childlessness in the marriage was what made him treat Dominique that way. Chanwoo told Camille, calm in the specific way people go. Calm once shame has finally worn down all its sharp edges. Camille sat with the irony of it a long time. She was the one who had carried the love back into that house, and she was the one who ended up hated most inside it. Once the marriage stitched itself back together, Dominique stopped going to Chanwoo entirely. She let it become, in her own mind, something that had simply never happened. Protecting the child growing inside her meant letting her husband keep believing a lie that would end up shaping the rest of that child's life. You can't tell Siwoo about this. Promise me, Dominique had said. Chanwoo carried that for years, the hurt of watching her choose to stay. He kept working for the family anyway, because it meant he still got to see his daughter grow, and because some part of him was still in love with a woman who had never asked him to choose, only because she had already chosen without asking. But then he caught you too. That means you started it again. Why? Camille asked, her face giving nothing away. Because what was between us was never just a fling. It was love. It built up for years, until we ended up right back in it, Chanwoo said, the shame sitting heavy in every word. Camille told him, gently but without flinching, that it wasn't fair, the way two adults could make a decision and hand a child the whole cost of it for the rest of her life. I'm tired of being angry with you. You didn't play your role as a father in my life, she said, calm in a way that cost her more than it looked like it did. But I'm willing to give you the chance to do it now. Chanwoo was already crying before she finished the sentence. He pulled her into his arms and held on, finally letting himself feel how much it meant that she had left the door open at all. On the other side of Seoul, Siwoo had just hung up a phone call that was about to take the rest of what he had left. His transportation business had bet everything on a deal that collapsed, and the loans he'd taken to fund it had turned overnight into debt with no way out. He sat there a long moment in shock, unable to reconcile how far he'd fallen since the day Camille walked out of his house. She was building something real out there while he and Simone kept sliding backward. And this was the one blow he wasn't sure he could climb out from under. Simone had just finished fashion school, and it had given her nothing to show for it. He had believed, once, foolishly, that she would be the more talented daughter, since she and Camille shared the same mother. She wasn't. He had spent every semester's tuition on a program that returned her to him exactly as empty-handed as she'd gone in. Dad, I need some money for school, she said one afternoon, thumb dragging lazily across her phone screen, not once looking up to notice the man in front of her was drowning. He sent it anyway. He climbed the stairs alone afterward. He never blamed her, not once. He only understood, quietly, that he needed to find some way to pull them both back from the edge, before there was nothing left to pull. Sehun had never made peace with her son falling for a black woman. That was the only way she ever let herself refer to Camille, even in the privacy of her own head. The Chen family was the partnership she'd always wanted. Two fashion houses joined through marriage instead of paperwork, and she had promised her friend of 30 years, Minseo, that her son would come around eventually to Minseo's daughter, Nari. Sehun believed, the way certain mothers believe, that a son could be steered if the right pressure landed in the right places. You said we were going to be a family soon, Minseo said one evening. Calm the way, she was always calm. The calm of a woman who had run her father's company for 60 years and buried 3 marriages under the weight of that dedication. I know, Sehun started. Then what am I seeing on the screen about him and that black girl? Minseo cut in. Minseo, this is just a phase for him. My son will not marry a black person. I know he'll see her for who she truly is, Sehun said, anger sharpening every word. Sehun had grown up in Seoul but done her college years abroad, like her son Harvard, in her case, where the first real friendship she'd built with a black woman had ended in theft and betrayal. That wasn't the only reason she didn't want her son marrying Camille. Sehun also hated poor people, plain and simple, and Camille was both poor and black. 2 separate reasons, and either one alone would have been enough for her. Sehun made sure Camille felt every inch of that dislike, questioning her at every turn, waiting for whatever moment her son wasn't around to strike. At the office, that moment came often. One afternoon, Camille was finishing her summer line when she felt the room shift before she even turned, every worker going still at once. She looked back and found Sehun in the doorway. "Are these the dresses you want us to display this summer?" Sehun asked, circling the rack with a kind of irritation that told you nothing was going to satisfy her, no matter what she found there. Camille only watched. This wasn't the first time someone had hated her without cause, and she wasn't in the business of begging for approval anymore. "Must everybody expose themselves like you? Some people want to be decent. You should. At least 10 dresses in this collection cover up nicely." Camille cut in, calm, already gesturing her workers back to their tasks, as if the conversation had ended. "And as you said, it's summer. People might want lighter pieces too. I'm giving them the choice." "You talk as though you aren't here because of my—" Sehun kept going until a voice from behind her stopped her cold. "Sehun." She flinched at the sound of her own name in his mouth. A small, practiced smile arrived on her face as she turned, trying to smooth the moment over, before her son could see what had actually happened here. But Taeyang wasn't smiling. He had already moved out of his mother's house over exactly this, the way she treated Camille whenever she got near her. And now, she had followed her here too, into the one place that was supposed to belong to Camille alone. "Don't come to her workplace and tell her what to do. She knows what she's doing," he said, frustration threading through the calm, years of the same fight sitting behind every syllable. "But I," Sehun tried, "do not come into Camille's studio to question her skill or her work. That job belongs to Mireille, and Mireille has never had a problem with it." He gestured toward the door, and Sehun left without another word. Camille hated that they had to fight over her at all. She hated that his mother had turned out to be another version of her father, someone who decided who deserved love before ever bothering to look closely at the person in front of them. But she wasn't going to let a hatred she never earned cost her the job and the life she'd built with her own hands. "I'm sorry. She's just overprotective sometimes," Taeyang said, holding her hands. "She just doesn't like me. I've been here before. There's nothing I can do that'll please her. So, I'd rather not try." Camille said simply, and the truth of it went straight through him, because she wasn't wrong. There was no pleasing his mother. He pulled her into a tight hug instead. "This thing we're building is between the two of us. Only what we think matters. Everything else is just noise," he said, pulling back to kiss her forehead. It took Simone 3 months to notice her father had gone under. That was how little of him she'd been looking at. "You didn't send me any money for my graduation gown, Daddy," she whined into the phone. "You'll have to wear your old one, Simone, please," he pleaded. He had thinned out from the stress of it all, the endless scrambling, the frustration of trying to fix something that wouldn't be fixed, and it had left him a shadow of the man he used to be. "Simone, dear, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm really broke right now," he said, calm, despite everything underneath it. "So what? I should wear an old dress because you're broke, Daddy? All my friends are going shopping," she whined, and it hollowed something out of him he didn't know, still worked. He sent her a little money anyway. It was the smallest amount he'd ever given her, and that was the day she finally understood. Her father was actually, truly broke. 3 months after graduation, she was still at home, and he couldn't secure her a single internship anywhere. He'd lost his money, and, somehow with it, his connections, and every door in the fashion world he knocked on closed before he could finish his sentence. Simone made none of it easier. She complained about everything, how his situation, as she called it, was ruining her future, how she needed money for this and that. He could see now, clearly, how much he'd spoiled her over the years, though admitting it out loud felt like admitting he'd built the very thing now crushing him. He loved his daughter. He wasn't sure anymore that he liked her. One evening, they were watching the news together when Camille's face flashed across the screen, her design worn by one of the biggest actresses in Seoul. "You promised you'd make her pay, but she's thriving, and you can't even get me a basic job at a fashion house." Simone sulked. Siwoo looked at her, something curdling in his chest at how little empathy she carried. She had never once asked how he was holding up through any of this. Everything, always, circled back to what she wanted. But her bitterness handed him an idea he hadn't let himself consider before now. He could go to Camille and beg her to take Simone on as an intern. He believed, of all people, Camille would understand a father's desperation to hold his family together, even if his own daughter never could. He stayed quiet while Simone kept listing everything he wasn't doing for her. Minseo and Nari came to see Sehun one evening for a planned dinner. "You told me you'd sort out the issue between your son and that girl, and yet nothing has changed," Minseo said, calm as always. Sehun glanced at her, then at Nari. "That's why I invited you. Nari is a sharp girl, and even if Taeyang thinks he loves that girl, Nari can change that. Let her come and work for the Choi Enterprise. That way she can seduce Taeyang from the inside, Sehun said. You want the heir to the Chen company working for yours? Minseo started, but Nari cut her off. Mum, let's hear her out. Nari had spent 3 years being told Taeyang belonged to her, and though she never actually loved him, she had come to feel entitled to him the way people grow, entitled to something simply because they were promised it long enough. Watching Camille beside him didn't register to her as heartbreak. It registered as theft, someone else's hands on something that had already been hers. You don't have to genuinely work there, Sehun continued, looking only at Nari now, sensing she was the one who could still be moved. I'll make sure you're respected the entire time, but I want you for my son. You're the best match for him, and I hope working there a while, until he sees it, isn't too much to ask. Minzio watched her daughter quietly. Nari shook her head slowly. Taeyang is mine. I won't let anyone take him from me, she said. Sehun smiled. Minseo relaxed. They finished their dinner in agreement. Camille and Taeyang sat together at her place one evening, talking about a new piece she'd built, around the simplicity of how he dressed. I never believed your boring dresses could inspire one of my designs, she teased, smiling. How are you calling my style boring, and still managing to make me blush about it? She burst out laughing, realizing what she'd just done, called him both boring and her muse in the same breath. These were their boring days, the ones where she was at his place, or he was at hers. Days that meant nothing to anyone watching from the outside, and everything to the two of them. She had never let herself be this happy before. Then her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost let it die, but the fashion world made strangers call at strange hours, so she picked up. Camille. Her whole face went cold at the sound of that voice. Taeyang caught the shift immediately, ready to step in, but something in the way she held herself told him this wasn't danger. It was older than that. Siwoo, she said flatly. His expression changed too, but he held himself back. This was hers to carry. I need to see you. I know I have no right to ask, Siwoo said. You're right. You have no reason to see me. She was ready to end the call. Is there anything else you want, Siwoo? Then she heard it, the crack running under his voice. I lost my business, Camille. I've lost everything. I just need to talk to you. One favor. Something you can actually give me, please. She looked over at Taeyang, whose face had stayed even through all of it. He gave her a small nod, already reading everything she wasn't saying out loud. The pull, the hurt, the way some part of her still needed permission to go and hear the man out. She met him at a cafe near her apartment, somewhere neutral, somewhere that didn't carry the weight of the house she used to live in. Siwoo laid it all out, the collapse, the debt, how he could no longer provide for himself or for her sister Simone. You call her my sister now, she said, cold, but you told me you only had one daughter. He begged. She watched a man she'd once feared reduced to something smaller than fear, the ghost of himself, maybe, or maybe just what cruelty finally looks like once it's run out of places to hide. And even through her own anger, it hurt her that she couldn't manufacture enough hatred to stop caring that he was suffering. Simone was, after all, her sister, even if Simone had never once carried that truth the way it deserved to be carried. He asked if she could take Simone on as an intern, train her properly. Camille sighed. I don't have the power to hire anyone, Siwoo, but I'll see what I can do and let you know. She already knew convincing Taeyang wasn't the real hurdle. Mireille was the actual gatekeeper, a woman who cared about talent and nothing else. Camille had spent years building something real with her, and she wasn't going to let a family that had been cruel to her poison that now. She decided to take it to Mireille first, since fashion belonged to Mireille's side of the house. Taeyang was waiting by her office when she got back. What did he want? He asked, careful, aware this wasn't his to steer. Let me talk to Mireille first. I'll tell you after, Camille said, already moving past him. Mireille was buried in work as usual, and waved her in without ceremony. Can I hire my sister as an intern here? Mireille's eyes lifted, cold at first. Then, something closer to concern moved through them. The same sister my brother told me about? Why? They're going through a hard time, and honestly, she's my half-sister, and I can't do to them what they did to me. Mireille studied her, trying to understand why anyone would extend a hand toward a family that ruthless. Then she thought of her own mother, of how she still picked up every call, despite knowing full well the woman never wanted her running this company simply because she was a woman. Every family carried something rotting, quietly under the floorboards. If you bring her in, you train her, you keep her in check. Whatever she does, it falls on you, Mireille said, her work face already back in place. Camille nodded, surprised at how easily it had been granted, and turned to leave. Don't forget, the biggest launch of the year is in 3 months. I need you at your best. Camille nodded again and left. She found Taeyang and told him everything. Are you sure you want them in your space? Can you trust her? He asked. She's my sister, Taeyang. I can't trust her, but I also can't leave her at her worst. He pulled her into a hug, understanding completely. Family, sometimes, was the heaviest thing a person had to carry and still couldn't put down. I'll be with you all the way, baby. You know I love you, he said, something softer in his voice than usual, and she felt her cheeks warm before she could stop them. What has gotten into you? She laughed against his chest. You have gotten into me, he said, and kissed her before she could answer. They were still wrapped up in each other when Sehun's cough cut through the room. Camille pulled back fast, some old reflex kicking in, the feeling of having been caught doing something wrong, even though she hadn't. I need to speak to you, Taeyang, privately. Sehun looked at Camille the way she always did, like something she'd rather not have in the room. Camille excused herself. Taeyang shot his mother a warning look before turning to face her. What was so important you had to interrupt me, Ioma? The Chen heir wants to work here, under Mireille. I haven't spoken to her about it yet. I wanted your approval first. He looked at his mother, confused as to why the heir of one of Seoul's biggest fashion houses would want a job at his company. Why? Because she wants to, Taeyang, Sehun snapped. Ioma, I don't run the fashion side of this company, asked Mireille. I don't need Mireille's permission. Nari starts next week. She walked out before he could argue further. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't have the bandwidth to untangle his mother's motives right then. He picked up the phone and called his sister. Mum started again. Come to my office, he said, and hung up. Mireille arrived within minutes. Taeyang told her everything that had happened. She's up to something, Mireille said, already thinking 3 steps ahead. Yes, she is, and I'm tired of it, Taeyang said, his eyes catching Camille walking past the glass, a small smile breaking through despite everything. When are you finally going to tell her what you want? Mireille asked, amused. I don't know if she's ready for forever. You'll never know until you ask, Mireille said, and left him with that. Camille called her father and told him Simone could intern under her, warning him to make sure she behaved. Any slip up and you're both finished with me, she said, and ended the call. Siwoo thanked her over and over, then told Simone the news with more excitement than he'd shown in months. I just got you an internship at the best fashion house in Seoul. Where, Daddy? Simone asked, barely able to contain herself. When he told her it was under Camille, her face fell. She hated the idea of working beneath her sister. What if she hates me? She pouted. Siwoo reassured her Camille wouldn't be harsh, since he'd already warned her not to be. He knew that was a stretch, but he told himself Camille would be kind, if only because she'd always been better than the rest of them at that. The next day, Nari walked into the Choi building, dressed sharp, and every head turned. Everyone knew the name Chen. The company was one of the few in Seoul that could actually compete with Choi. Camille watched her walk toward Taeyang's office alongside Sehun, and something tightened in her stomach. She told herself it wasn't jealousy. She wasn't sure she believed herself. Taeyang, furious at his secretary for letting his mother through without warning, didn't even lift his head when they entered. This is the AI branch of the enterprise. You'll want Mireille's office. Nari froze at the dismissal. Taeyang knew his mother well enough to know she was working an angle, and he had no patience left for it that day. Is that how you speak to your mother, Taeyang? Sehun snapped. Iyama, I'm busy. If she needs her mentor, Mireille's office is down the hall. That was all he said. Sehun took Nari out, humiliated, Nari muttering the whole walk about how he'd probably never be pleased with anyone but Camille. Sehun stopped outside Camille's office, staring in at her for a long moment, Nari beside her doing the same. Camille, absorbed in her work, never noticed. I don't care what my son thinks he knows, Sehun said quietly. That girl isn't entering my family. Taeyang is yours. He just doesn't know it yet. 2 days later, Simone arrived at Choi. She took in the scale of the place, how much bigger it had become since the AI division launched, and felt something curdle in her when she saw Camille walking toward her, dressed like she belonged there, like she owned the floor beneath her feet. Of course she looked like that. She was sleeping with the boss. She remembered her father's warning before she left the house, that she wasn't as untouchable as she thought, and that she was not to disrespect Camille here. Watching Camille move through the space now, Simone understood he hadn't been exaggerating. This wasn't the Camille she grew up with. And she hated it. Hated that Camille had somehow ended up better than her at everything that mattered. Camille showed her to her workspace, a small cubicle, nothing more. Simone looked at it like it was an insult next to the office Camille had. It's so small, she murmured. Maybe Siwoo never taught you gratitude, Camille said, already walking away, But at some point, you'll have to learn it yourself. If it isn't good enough, you can leave, Simone. Simone stood there, stunned, unable to talk back and hating every second of holding her tongue. Simone found other outlets for her bitterness. She started gossiping with the other interns, planting the seed that Camille had stolen her designs to get where she was. "Camille is your sister?" one intern asked, shocked. "Yes, and I don't usually tell people this, but those designs she showed Mireille were mine. I'm the one who actually went to fashion school," Simone whispered. "Really? I always thought she designed them herself." "No, she's just a thief." It spread the way office gossip always spreads, quietly, then everywhere at once, designed to chip away at Camille, one whisper at a time. Camille caught wind of it in passing and let it slide off her. The office was always gossiping about something. Until someone confronted her directly, it wasn't worth her time. Nari tried everything to get Taeyang to notice her, dressing the way Camille dressed, walking the way Camille walked, flirting whenever she found an opening. He stayed cold through all of it. That coldness never showed up when Camille was around. His whole face changed the moment she entered a room, and it happened without effort, without him even trying. At another dinner with her mother and Sehun, Nari finally let her frustration show. "He acts like I disgust him," she whined. Minseo's face went cold. Nari is the heir to a fashion empire worth millions. She isn't a husband chaser. "You told me you wanted our houses joined. Instead, you've turned my daughter into an employee and a desperate woman chasing a man who won't look at her." She paused. "Does your son not want to marry Nari?" "I've told you already, Minseo. Taeyang doesn't know what he wants. He's been dating that girl over a year and hasn't proposed. She's just something to pass the time." "I want Nari there when it ends," Sehun said, convincing enough that even Nari's mood shifted back. "There's a rumor going around that she stole her sister's designs," Nari said, smiling now. "I knew she was a thief." Sehun scoffed. "I'm going to post about it. Let Taeyang see who he's really with," Nari said, determined. Minseo said nothing further, though something in her sat uneasy. She didn't want her daughter turned into someone chasing a prize that had already decided against her. She simply hoped, for Sehun's sake, that all of this ended the way Sehun kept promising it would. Camille saw the rumor spreading online the next morning and smiled. Her sister hadn't changed, but there was nothing new to do about that. Her phone rang. "Is this still not enough for you?" Taeyang asked, careful not to push too hard. She gave a tired laugh. "These rumors aren't touching my career or Mireille's trust in me. If anything, it's just showing everyone how jealous she is." He reminded her, gently, that she shouldn't wait until it actually hurt to act, because by then, it might be too late. That sat with her longer than she expected. He wasn't wrong. Simone could do worse. Camille went to see Chanwoo that evening, needing his read on things more than usual. Because throughout her life, Chanwoo's advice had been the best she had ever received. She told him everything that had been happening. "I feel like I should be there for her. She's my sister, but it's so hard to actually care for her, because she is always plotting," she told him. "Being there for someone doesn't mean you stop being there for yourself," Chanwoo said. "Protect what's yours while you're trying to help her." She always listened when he spoke like that. He'd become her steadiest voice, the one person who had never once stopped believing in her. He made her dinner. She ate and went home. Taeyang came to her office the next morning and told her about the family dinner happening the next day. "I don't think your mum considers me family, Taeyang," Camille said calmly. She had learned by now not to overstep, and walking into a family dinner, in the same room as Sehun, felt exactly like overstepping. Taeyang looked at her and told her how much he loved her, for her to still not consider herself his family. "You're my family, Camille. You know that. I'm in this. I want to be in this with you." Camille looked at him, shocked, wondering if he was trying to tell her something deeper than the words themselves. "I want to be in this with you too," she said, not even noticing the tears until they were already pouring down her cheeks. She loved him. He'd been the only real person in her life. He pulled her into a kiss. He'd seen her tears, and he already had his answer. She wasn't the most romantic person, but he could see she loved him too, and that was all he needed. Everything was settled. Nari saw the two of them together and burned with it, though she said nothing. Sehun had promised her this dinner would be different, just the two of them, nothing to distract him. Instead, on the night meant to be Mireille, Taeyang, and Sehun alone, everyone showed up with someone, except Mireille, who understood exactly what a family dinner was supposed to look like. Camille wore one of her own designs, tailored so precisely to her, it looked like it had been made for this exact night. When she and Taeyang walked in, they found Minseo and Nari already seated. Mireille sat calm, bracing for whatever storm was coming. Sehun's face shifted the second she saw Camille beside her son. I said family dinner, Taeyang, not a work meeting, Sehun said, calm on the surface. Seems like you were the only one who didn't understand what you said, he replied, gesturing for a servant to bring an extra chair. The last one at the table had already gone to Camille. The silence that followed pressed on the whole room. Mireille braced herself, certain something was coming. Sehun broke it with a small cough. Taeyang, I expected you here alone. I brought Nari, so you two could get to know each other. I know her already. You're Nari, right? He said, indifferent, and Nari nodded. Nari, I'm sure you've met my girlfriend, Camille. You can't miss her, she works here, and she's a sensation. The word landed lightly between Mireille and Camille, who exchanged a small private laugh, because that was the exact word Camille had used to describe Mireille when she first met Taeyang. How can you call a design thief a sensation? Sehun scoffed. Of course you'd believe that. You want it to be true so badly, so you can finally feel good about hating her, Taeyang said, and the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Everything my sister said was a rumor, Camille finally spoke. A rumor you're too scared to debunk? Please, Sehun sneered. I'm not scared of anything, ma'am. I'm the lead designer of this enterprise. The other person is an intern, with no work of her own, to prove her claim. Debunking an obvious lie when I have real work to do isn't something I have time for. Don't waste your breath explaining anything to my mother. She doesn't care whether it's true. She just wants it to be, Taeyang said, and the room went colder still. I don't know what you two think this is, Sehun said, but once you come back to your senses, you'll know you're marrying Nari. Mireille laughed quietly to herself, already knowing her mother's game. I'm not marrying Nari, Taeyang said firmly. Who will you marry then? The black design thief? The bitterness in her voice was impossible to miss. Camille had been here before, and she had no interest in staying for round 2. Thank you for dinner, she said, standing to leave. Taeyang caught her hand gently before she could get far. We're all family here, as my mother said, and I don't think there's a better place to make a promise than surrounded by family. Right, Mireille? He looked to his sister, who nodded, the only person at that table, on his side. I want everyone here to understand that Camille is my family now, and I want to build a life with her. He turned to Camille, whose shock hadn't fully landed yet, and dropped to one knee. I've had this ring for a while, afraid you might not want what I want, but Mireille told me I'd never know until I asked. So Camille, will you marry me? The evening had been one of the worst she'd had in months, and somehow, in the space of a single sentence, he'd made it one of the best she'd had in years. Of course I'll marry you, she said, hand already stretched toward his. Mincio pulled Nari, who was on the edge of tears, away from the table. Sehun sat there boiling. Mireille clapped and laughed, delighted. None of it touched the two of them, wrapped up in each other, kissing, like the room had already emptied out around them. Okay, besties, be honest with us. Did you scream when he got down on one knee? Or did Sehun's face ruin the moment for you a little? Tell us in the comments. We want to know who was rooting for Nara's failure. And if you're new here, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because we drop stories like this every single week, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Mincio spent the entire night consoling her daughter, something she'd been avoiding facing head-on for a while now. I'll make sure the Choi family pays for this, she said coldly. Nari wasn't listening. The heartbreak had swallowed everything else. She didn't even love him. She hated that he'd never loved her, and hated more that she'd never been anything close to the prize she believed she was. Then her mind drifted back to something. Aoma, can you find her sister? I think she'll be useful, whether the rumor is true or not. Mincio understood exactly what her daughter meant. Whoever had started that rumor clearly hated Camille enough to be useful, and if there was truth buried in it somewhere, that person would need someone with money behind them to actually be heard. She promised to find the girl, and through the rest of the ride home, while comforting her daughter, some quieter, colder part of her was already working out how to make Sehun and her family pay. The engagement spread through the office within a day, and Camille's rumor died with the same speed it had spread. One afternoon, walking past, Camille caught Simone doing exactly what she was best at, gossiping, since her design skill clearly wasn't working out for her. Simone went quiet the instant she noticed Camille watching. Camille smiled and called her into the office. Don't ever take credit for my work again, she said, firm, final. Simone walked out humiliated. Camille remembered everything Chanwoo had told her to keep in mind, protecting herself while still trying to do right by her family, and Camille made a quiet decision standing there. One she didn't say out loud to anyone. Simone went home and told Siwoo how full of herself Camille had become, how much she hated being related to her at all. 3 days later, Mincio had already found Simone. A black Mercedes waited outside Choi after closing hours, and when Simone stepped out the door, Mincio offered her a ride. Simone had always been drawn to flashy things, but the cold look in Mincio's eyes made her pause before getting in. "Don't worry, I just need your help with something. We don't have to drive anywhere if you're not comfortable," Mincio said. Simone got in afterwards, and they talked. Mincio read her within minutes, 22 years old, nothing to show for it, entitled untrustworthy. But there was something usable in her. Her jealousy for her sister ran deep enough to work with. "I want you to help take Camille out of that industry and make sure that company loses millions on their upcoming launch. Pull it off, and I'll give you 20 million won." Simone's eyes lit up. "Here's my card. My address is on it. If you're interested, come for dinner tomorrow," Mincio said. And Simone stepped out, turning the card over in her hand the whole walk home. The number 20 million sitting in her chest like something warm. She told Siwoo everything the moment she got home, how Camille had been cruel to another family who now wanted her out of the company. "They said if I help them, they'll give me 20 million won, Dad. Do you know how much that would fix for us?" Simone said loudly, watching her father's face shift from caution straight into calculation. "What do they want?" he asked. "I don't know yet. I'll find out tomorrow." Whatever begging he had done for Camille's help months earlier was gone now. It was them or her. And as far as he was concerned in that moment, she was no daughter of his. Simone arrived at the Chen mansion the next evening and stood stunned in the doorway. Her father's old mansion looked like a cottage next to this. Nari and Mincio sat waiting at the table, a servant taking her coat, and Nari studied her the way her mother had described, materialistic, unwilling to build anything for herself. They walked her through the plan. Simple enough. The launch was 2 weeks away, and from her time inside Choi, Nari knew Camille's designs made up 70% of what was going out on that runway. If those designs leaked 2 days before the event, the company wouldn't have time to recover, and the losses would run into the millions. "So all I need to do is find it and send it to you?" Simone asked. "Ready." "Yes, but you'll need to be careful," Nari said. She warned her not to get caught. If she did, it would prove the leak had come from inside Choi. Simone left already turning the problem over in her head. Camille didn't trust her. She needed to fix that first. For 5 days, Simone was more of a sister to Camille than she had been in 22 years, and Camille let herself fall for it the way you fall for the version of a person you've spent your whole life wishing was real. Simone showed up early. She listened without complaint. She asked real questions about the work, and seemed, for once, to want the answers rather than the credit. She apologized for the rumors, told Camille it had all come from jealousy, that she wanted to learn now, actually learn, not just take. On the third evening, Simone stayed late without being asked, helping repin a rack of samples that had come loose during a fitting, small, unglamorous work, the kind nobody does for credit. "You don't have to stay," Camille said. "I know," Simone answered, already reaching for the next hanger. Camille caught herself thinking, standing there, maybe this is what having a sister actually feels like. She would think of that moment again later and understand it differently. That 5 extra minutes alone near a desk full of designs had never been an accident. It should have felt too easy. Camille noticed that, somewhere underneath the relief, how quickly the years of coldness had thawed, how quickly her guard had come down for someone who had never once given her a reason to lower it before. But the wedding was 4 months out, and she wanted her family there, whatever was left of the word family by now, and this felt like a door cracking open after 22 years of being shut in her face. She let herself walk through it. She wanted, more than she wanted to admit even to herself, for this one thing to be real. Then that evening, Camille walked in because she had forgotten to lock up and caught Simone rushing out of the office, something too quick in the way she moved. "The project you asked me to work on, I forgot the design," Simone said, already halfway through the door. Camille let it go. She told herself it was nothing. She wanted, badly, for it to be nothing. 2 days before the launch, every one of her designs went viral on the web. She was already on her way home when it hit her phone. She turned the car around without thinking and drove back through streets that suddenly felt too slow, her mind circling the same question, how and who could possibly have had access to her office. Then, the memory of the sample rack surfaced, uninvited. Simone, staying late. Camille understood now, all at once, that the kindness had been aimed at exactly this, 5 borrowed minutes near a desk that held everything worth stealing. She'd been fooled again. Worse than fooled, She'd wanted so badly to be fooled that she'd handed her sister the exact thing she'd spent 5 days pretending to protect. Her phone rang. Mireille. She let it go to voicemail and pulled up the office camera footage instead, hands not quite steady. On the surface, everything looked fine that evening. But it had to have happened then. It had to be that evening, because that was the only time she forgot to lock up her office. Taeyang walked in while she was still staring at the screen, and she braced herself for the anger she assumed she'd earned. Instead, he pulled her into a hug, and something in her broke open all at once. She started to cry. "It's Simone. It's Simone," she kept repeating, as if saying it enough times might make it hurt less, or make it not true at all. "I know," he said quietly. "Everyone warned me not to trust her, even Chan Wu." She stopped mid-sentence, something surfacing. Chan Wu's advice, weeks ago, about protecting herself. The decision she'd made afterward and never mentioned to anyone, tucked away like a small insurance policy against a hope she hadn't wanted to admit she still needed. "Wait," she pulled back from him and pulled up the first feed she'd already been looking at. "Look at this video. Does this look normal to you?" Taeyang studied it. "It looks lopsided, like it's on a loop." She wasn't calm enough to study it herself. He had to be calm enough for both of them. She understood, slowly, that Siwoo must have been behind the tampering. He knew enough about the technical side of business to know someone who could rig a camera feed like this. How had they repaid her, after everything, like this? Whatever thin thread had still connected her to that family, however frayed, had just been cut in front of her. She walked toward the corner where 3 small cameras sat hidden, ones she'd installed weeks ago and told no one about. "You had cameras in your office?" Taeyang asked, something like pride threading through the shock. "I figured if I was going to do business with someone that evil, I should at least know what she was doing in my space," Camille said, still crying, her chest caving in on itself. "That, and my dad advised me to protect myself. Thank God I listened. I trusted her, Taeyang. I actually believed she loved me again, like when we were kids." He held her tighter. "I don't blame you for trusting your family, baby. If it was her, she'll pay for it." Mireille kept calling. It was already 11 at night, and the two of them sat together going through 2 hours of footage until they found it the section looped for exactly 30 minutes. Timed for the window, Camille hadn't been in the office at all. Whoever set it up had been smart about it. An empty office raised no questions, since there was no reason for anyone to expect her to be there that late anyway. The fact that the moment she caught Simone in her office didn't show on the office camera was what had tipped her off in the first place. But Simone hadn't known about the second set of cameras. She had no idea they existed. And there she was on the real footage, photographing files off Camille's desk one by one, quick and careless, the way people move when they've already convinced themselves they won't get caught. "Gotcha," Taeyang said, a small, satisfied smile breaking through. His phone rang again. This time he answered. "Mireille, let's talk in the morning." He turned back to his fiancée, still crying. "You didn't do anything wrong wanting to believe in your family. You didn't do anything wrong trying to help when you could. You're the victim here. But you are not someone to be messed with, and I'm proud of you." He wiped her tears with his thumb, then told her he was only here initially to tell her that they must marry, whether or not they lost millions. She laughed at him alongside the tears. "But now we can get married and still make the money back. This is all you, Camille," he said. And this time, the tears weren't only about betrayal, but about how long she'd spent looking for family in the wrong direction, while the truest one had been standing beside her all along. She kissed him. It was already past midnight, so they stayed in his office that night. He instructed his driver to bring over change of clothes for the both of them in the morning. The next morning, the moment Camille saw Simone, she didn't slow down. She crossed the room and slapped her, hard enough that the sound of it seemed to hang in the air a second longer than it should have. "You hate me so much you'd hurt yourself just to watch me fall," she said, cold. "The last time you tried something stupid, I told you not to do it again. You did it anyway. Now you'll pay for it." Simone stood frozen, one hand rising slowly to her cheek, watching Camille walk off toward a meeting as if nothing had happened at all. Her heart hammered. Nari's warning echoed in her head, "Don't get caught." She called her father, hands shaking. "I think Camille knows it was me. We're in trouble," she said. Siwoo was already on his feet, moving for his car before she'd even finished the sentence. "We?" He had lost everything already for a daughter who couldn't even carry out a plan without dragging him under with her. Minutes later, Simone was called into a conference room. She walked in shaking, and something in her already knew, the way a body knows before the mind catches up, that whatever was coming next would not be survivable in the way she'd hoped. They played her the footage, her, at Camille's desk, camera in hand, photographing the designs, her face lit blue by her own phone screen. She stared at it, and the room seemed to tilt slightly under her. She had believed her father's contact had disabled every camera in that office. She had believed a lot of things, it turned out, that had never been true. "I know you're wondering how this is possible," Camille said quietly. "I had my own." Simone broke down completely, begging, her voice climbing into something raw and childlike. The voice of someone who had never once had to face a consequence she couldn't cry or whine her way out of, and was only now understanding that this time there would be no way around it. Taeyang told Simone to look at him and not at her sister. He was the CEO of this company. Mireille smiled, watching him say it. Those were words he'd never spoken out loud before, not like that. And today, he said them because he wanted to protect his fiancée, and he was finally owning the title that came with doing it. Simone told him it was Mincio and Nari who had put her up to it. Taeyang smiled. The Chen fashion house was the very reason the stolen designs had gone viral in the first place. They'd tagged the images themselves. The page that leaked it was anonymous, but their own tagging had brought the whole thing into the light. Sehun walked in the way she always walked into rooms that weren't hers, like she already owned the outcome before anyone had explained what was happening. She hadn't asked what the meeting was about. All she'd seen on her phone was Camille's name and the word leak, and that was enough for her to build the whole story in her head before she crossed the threshold. "How could you be so careless?" She snapped at Camille, already mid-scold. "Your designs? Out on the internet for the whole world to see, and you're sitting here like it's nothing?" Nobody rushed to answer her. "You brought the enemy into my house, and now you're complaining about the fire," Taeyang said, cutting through her before she could keep going. Sehun's mouth opened, then closed. It took her a second to understand he wasn't defending Camille from her. He was accusing her, directly, of being the one who'd let Nari anywhere near this company in the first place. It was the silence after that finally slowed her down. She looked around the room properly, Taeyang's face set in a way she didn't recognize, Mireille watching her with something unreadable, Camille sitting still and saying nothing at all. And then she saw Simone, shaking, crying, her face doing the thing a person's face does right before they lose everything. Something in Sehun paused. She looked at the girl a moment longer, and for the first time since walking in, she wondered what exactly she had missed. "Your best friend Mincio paid her to steal Camille's designs," Taeyang said, calm, letting the words land at their own pace. "This is on you, as much as it's on Mincio's plotting." Sehun's face didn't move, but something behind it did. The slow, cold arrival of understanding that the woman she'd trusted for 30 years had used Sehun's own hatred of Camille as the exact door she needed to walk through. "Never speak to my fiancée like that again," Taeyang said. "If you can't accept her, you're no longer part of this family. Security will see you to your car." Camille sat there quietly through all of it, watching the woman who had spent years making her feel small get walked out of a room she no longer had any power in. Taeyang turned back to Simone. "You've made us lose millions, and you will pay for that. And don't look at your sister. She isn't coming to save you today." Simone looked anyway. Camille didn't meet her eyes. Siwoo tried to run once the police came for him. He didn't get far. A man who had built his whole life on appearances rarely knows how to disappear when it actually matters. They caught him within the hour, his car still running in a lot 2 blocks from his apartment, his hands shaking too badly to get the door open in time. In the interrogation room, faced with everything laid out in front of him, the tampered footage, the recordings of Simone's calls, the trail leading straight back to his own contact in the security business, he did the one thing that would define the rest of Simone's life more than any prison sentence ever could. He denied her. Somewhere in a separate room, waiting for her own questioning, Simone heard about it secondhand, an officer mentioning offhand that her father had claimed that she carried everything out on her own because she was a spoiled child. She sat very still after that. She had spent her whole life being the daughter who was chosen, the one who got the goodnight kisses and the fashion school and the gowns, the one Camille had scrubbed floors so she wouldn't have to. She had never once had to ask herself what she actually was to him beyond convenient. Now she knew. She had been convenient for 22 years, and the moment she stopped being convenient, she stopped existing to him entirely. She didn't cry the way she used to cry, loud, demanding, sure that someone would come fix it. She cried quietly, the way Camille used to cry, though she would never have made that comparison herself. It was the first time in her life grief had come without an audience to perform it for. The Chen fashion house was sued by Choi for 5 times the revenue lost in the launch. Mincio fought it in the beginning, the way she fought everything, with lawyers and delay and the particular arrogance of a woman who had never once lost. But the evidence was clean. The tagged post was still live in 3 different archived versions, and eventually, there was nothing left to fight with. They paid, and it nearly bankrupted them in the process. Tae Yang, watching the numbers come in, made a decision that had less to do with revenge than with simple math. He bought what remained of the Chen Company outright, folding it into Choi, closing a door that had been open for 30 years between 2 families who would never sit at a table together again. Minseo sat in her office on the day the papers were finalized, in a building that no longer belonged to her, and understood, quietly, the way you understand something only once it's already too late to undo it, that she had spent 30 years building something for a daughter who had never once asked her to build it, and had lost all of it trying to hand her a man who never wanted her either. Nari didn't cry when she found out. She sat in her childhood bedroom, in a house that would soon belong to someone else, and thought about how she had never actually loved Taeyang. Not once, not even a little, and had still managed to lose everything chasing him anyway. That felt like the cruelest part of it, not the heartbreak, the waste. The Chen house refused to cover any legal costs for Siwoo or Simone, cutting them loose the moment the money ran dry, the same way Siwoo had cut Simone loose the moment she stopped being useful. Siwoo and Simone were both sentenced to 12 years for tampering with private property, unauthorized access, and the financial damage done to Choi. At sentencing, Simone looked for her father across the courtroom. He didn't look back. The wedding came 3 months later, exactly as planned. Se-hoon, by then, had run out of fight. It wasn't a dramatic surrender. No single moment where she fell to her knees and admitted she'd been wrong. It was smaller than that, quieter. It was watching her son's face during the worst of the scandal, watching how he had chosen Camille without hesitation, without needing a single second to decide, and understanding finally that there was no version of this where she won. So she came. She apologized to Camille in her own clipped, imperfect way. Not warm, not fully sincere even, but enough. Enough to walk through the door. Chan-woo walked his daughter down the aisle. He had spent 22 years failing her in silence, and this one walk, this one public claiming of her as his, was the smallest and largest thing he had ever done for her at once. His hands didn't shake, though something in his chest did, the whole way down. She wore a gown she'd designed herself, cut with the same precision she'd learned in a basement no one ever came down to check on. Back when the only audience for her work was a single bulb strung over a table, and her own stubborn hope that one day it would matter. Every guest in that room understood exactly whose hands had made it. She became, that day, the wife of the richest fashion CEO in Seoul. She had also, quietly, become something else, the first person in that family's history to walk into a room full of people who had once decided she wasn't worth loving and stand there anyway. In something she made with her own hands, loved by someone who had never once needed convincing. Mireille stood at the front of the room, happier than she'd been in years. Her brother, finally, was in love, and finally, someone in this family had chosen right. Years later, when Camille gave birth to twins, Mireille became the kind of aunt who showed up for everything, who never once had to be asked twice. Camille named one of the twins Dominique as her English name, and watched, over the following years, as the little girl gravitated toward fabric and color, the way her grandmother once had, in a life that finally had room for it. Their son, Damien, was all his father's son, endlessly curious about how things worked, forever taking apart whatever he could get his hands on and putting it back together slightly better than before. Mireille, who believed in building people around whatever gift they were born with, made sure each of them had exactly what they needed to grow into it, the way no one had ever done for her or for Camille when it counted. Se-hoon loved her grandchildren without condition, the kind of love she had never once managed to offer their mother when it would have mattered most. She never said it outright, not in so many words, but somewhere in the years of birthday dinners and school recitals and quiet Sunday visits, she came to understand something she would have laughed off a decade earlier. That Camille had turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to her son, and that everything she had once fought so hard to prevent had become the family she was now grateful to sit inside of. Chan-woo visited often. He never stopped being careful with himself around Camille, never quite let go of the guilt he still carried for all the years he'd stayed silent. But he watched her build a life bigger and warmer than the basement she'd started in, and some nights, sitting in her kitchen while she cooked, with both languages moving through the same sentence, the way her mother once had, he let himself believe that maybe, in the end, some of what he owed her had actually been paid. So tell us, besties, do you think Siwoo deserved everything that came for him? Or was there a part of you that still felt for a man who lost everything, trying to survive? And Simone, was she a victim of a father who used her? Or did she earn every year of that sentence herself? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. Did the Nari and Mincio betrayal catch you off guard? Or did you see it building the whole way through? And tell us, do you want more stories with this much drama and this many twists? Or should we slow things down a little next time? We genuinely want to know what you want to see. Thank you for staying with us till the end, Soul Besties. See you in the next one.